The little boy had not spoken a full sentence in 3 years. Not to his teachers. Not to doctors. Not even to the mother who spent every night crying beside his bedroom door. But on one cold evening, inside a luxury mansion filled with silence, a humble chef knelt beside the billionaire's autistic son and heard 5 words that changed everything forever. "I love you, Mom." Before we begin this emotional journey, if you believe kindness can heal broken hearts and that every child deserves love and patience, then please take a moment to like this video, comment below, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to the channel for more touching stories that stay with you forever. The mansion stood on the highest hill in the city, surrounded by glass walls, private guards, and expensive cars that sparkled under the rain. From the outside, it looked like the perfect life. Wealth, power, luxury, everything people dreamed about. But inside those walls lived a woman whose heart had been breaking a little more every single day. Sophia Loren was one of the richest businesswomen in the country. Her fashion empire stretched across continents, her face appeared in magazines, and the world admired her strength. Yet none of that mattered to her anymore. Every night she sat outside her 8-year-old son Daniel's room, holding back tears while listening to the painful silence that filled the house. Daniel had autism. Doctors called him highly sensitive and emotionally withdrawn. He barely spoke. He avoided eye contact. Sudden sounds terrified him. He spent hours lining up toy cars in perfect rows and became overwhelmed whenever someone tried forcing conversation. Therapists had come and gone. Specialists from different countries had tried helping him. Nothing worked for long. But the thing that hurt Sophia the most was not Daniel's silence. It was the way he pulled away whenever she tried hugging him. She loved her son more than life itself, yet she felt like a stranger standing outside the locked door of his heart. Her husband had left 2 years earlier. The pressure, the endless hospital visits, the emotional exhaustion, he simply walked away. Since then, Sophia carried everything alone while the world still expected her to smile at business meetings. One rainy afternoon, after firing another caretaker who lost patience with Daniel during a meltdown, Sophia sat in her giant dining room staring blankly at untouched food. The mansion felt colder than ever. One of the house managers carefully approached her and mentioned that the kitchen needed temporary help because the head chef had suddenly resigned. Sophia barely cared. She simply nodded and approved whoever was available. That decision changed all their lives. The next morning, a quiet man named Elias arrived carrying a small worn-out bag and a folded apron under his arm. He was in his early 40s, with tired eyes that looked older than his age. His clothes were simple, and his hands carried the marks of years spent working hard. No one would have guessed that behind his calm face lived a man who had survived unimaginable pain. Elias wasn't like the chefs Sophia usually hired. He had no famous restaurant experience or luxury hotel background. He worked in small roadside cafes most of his life. He cooked for construction workers, drivers, lonely strangers, and people who simply needed a warm meal after hard days. The mansion staff judged him immediately. They whispered that he looked too poor for such a rich home. But Elias ignored all of it. Because for him, survival had already taught him something important: hungry hearts mattered more than rich appearances. On his first day, while preparing soup in the kitchen, he noticed something unusual. A small boy stood silently near the doorway, watching him carefully. Daniel. The child didn't speak. He simply stared at the steam rising from the pot. Most adults became uncomfortable around Daniel because they didn't understand his silence. But Elias didn't force anything. He continued stirring the soup gently as if the boy's quiet presence was completely normal. After several minutes, Elias softly pushed a small bowl toward the edge of the counter. Daniel slowly walked closer. The kitchen staff froze, shocked. The boy almost never approached strangers. Daniel picked up the spoon and tasted the soup. Then, for the first time in weeks, he sat down calmly without panic or fear. Elias smiled quietly and continued cooking. That evening, Sophia heard something unusual from downstairs. Laughter. Tiny, soft laughter. She rushed toward the kitchen and stopped in disbelief. Daniel sat on the floor beside Elias while the chef shaped dough into funny animal figures. Flour covered the boy's hands. For the first time in years, his face looked relaxed. Sophia felt tears burning behind her eyes. But the moment Daniel noticed her standing there, he quickly retreated into silence again. The old pain returned instantly. Sophia apologized softly to Elias for the interruption, but he simply shook his head. He understood something she didn't yet realize. Daniel wasn't rejecting love. He was afraid of the world. And fear could only disappear through patience. Over the following weeks, something extraordinary began happening inside the mansion. Daniel started spending more time in the kitchen. Not with therapists. Not with specialists. With the humble chef everyone had underestimated. Elias never pressured him to speak. Instead, he communicated through little things. Through warm bread. Through simple routines. Through quiet moments that made Daniel feel safe. Every morning, Daniel watched Elias knead dough with careful hands. Every afternoon, he helped wash vegetables. Sometimes they simply sat together without saying anything at all. The servants couldn't understand it. Neither could Sophia. One evening, she finally asked Elias how he was doing it. The chef became silent for a moment before answering carefully. Years earlier, Elias had a daughter named Lily. She was autistic too. Sophia's eyes widened. Elias explained that Lily rarely spoke as a child. People called her difficult. Broken. Different. Schools rejected her. Relatives avoided her. But to him, she was the brightest light in the world. He spent years learning her world instead of forcing her into everyone else's. Then tragedy struck. A drunk driver ended Lily's life when she was only 10 years old. After losing her, Elias lost everything else too. His marriage collapsed under grief. He drifted between jobs carrying unbearable guilt because he couldn't save the person he loved most. As he spoke, Sophia noticed the deep sadness hidden behind his gentle smile. That pain was why he understood Daniel. Not as a condition. Not as a problem to fix. But as a child trying to survive a world that felt too loud. That night, Sophia cried alone in her room harder than she had in years. Because for the first time, someone saw her son with compassion instead of frustration. Slowly, Daniel began changing in small but powerful ways. He started making eye contact with Elias during cooking sessions. He began humming quietly while kneading dough. One afternoon, he even touched Sophia's hand briefly while passing her in the hallway. To another person, it might have seemed tiny. But to a mother starving for connection, it felt like sunlight after endless darkness. Still, the journey remained difficult. Daniel experienced severe meltdowns sometimes. Loud noises overwhelmed him. Unexpected visitors terrified him. During those moments, Sophia often broke down emotionally because she felt helpless. But Elias stayed calm every single time. He taught Sophia that Daniel didn't need perfection. He needed safety. Patience. Understanding. One rainy evening, Daniel suffered one of his worst meltdowns after hearing fireworks outside. He screamed, covered his ears, and knocked over furniture while trembling violently. The servants panicked. Sophia tried comforting him, but Daniel pushed her away and cried harder. Then Elias quietly entered the room carrying warm bread fresh from the oven. The familiar smell filled the air. Without speaking, Elias sat on the floor nearby and slowly began shaping dough into stars. Minutes passed. Daniel's breathing softened. Then slowly, painfully slowly, the boy crawled toward him and sat beside him. Sophia covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Because for the first time, she realized healing wasn't about forcing words. It was about building trust one gentle moment at a time. Months passed. The cold mansion slowly transformed into a home. The kitchen became the heart of the house. Daniel smiled more often now. He still struggled, but he no longer looked trapped inside invisible walls all the time. And Sophia herself began changing too. Before Elias arrived, her life revolved around business meetings and endless work because staying busy distracted her from loneliness. But now she spent evenings baking cookies beside her son, even when he barely interacted. She learned patience. She learned silence could also hold love. One afternoon, Sophia accidentally overheard Daniel whispering something while arranging cookies beside Elias. It was barely audible. But it was a word. More. Sophia froze completely. Her son had spoken. Not perfectly. Not loudly. But he spoke. She burst into tears immediately. Elias gently stopped her from rushing toward Daniel. "Don't make the moment heavy," he whispered softly. "Let him feel safe." That advice changed everything. Instead of overwhelming Daniel with excitement, Sophia simply stayed nearby and smiled through tears. And slowly, more words came over the following weeks. Tiny words. Simple words. But each one felt like a miracle. The mansion staff began treating Elias differently too. The man they once mocked had brought warmth back into a house drowning in sadness. But Elias himself remained humble. Because deep down, he still carried grief. At night, after everyone slept, he often stood alone in the kitchen holding Lily's old bracelet hidden in his pocket. Helping Daniel healed parts of him. But it also reminded him daily of the daughter he lost. One evening, Sophia found him quietly crying while washing dishes. It was the first time she saw his pain openly. He admitted something that shattered her heart. Sometimes when Daniel smiled, he remembered Lily so clearly that it hurt to breathe. Sophia placed her hand gently over his. For two broken people carrying different kinds of grief, that silent moment created an unspoken bond neither expected. Winter arrived. Snow covered the city outside while warmth filled the mansion inside. Then came the day that changed everything forever. Sophia's company hosted a massive charity gala at the mansion. Influential guests, celebrities, and business partners filled the halls with noise and flashing cameras. Sophia worried constantly about Daniel becoming overwhelmed. Usually during large gatherings, he isolated himself completely. But this time, Daniel stayed in the kitchen beside Elias while the party continued upstairs. As the evening went on, Sophia felt emotionally exhausted from pretending to smile for wealthy guests who knew nothing about her private pain. At one point, she quietly slipped away from the crowd and walked toward the kitchen just to breathe. She stopped outside the doorway. Inside, Daniel stood beside Elias holding a tray of cookies. The chef knelt down and gently encouraged him to take them upstairs for his mother. Daniel looked nervous. Terrified even. But Elias stayed patient. Sophia watched silently from a distance. Slowly, Daniel carried the tray into the crowded dining hall. The room became quiet immediately because everyone knew the child rarely interacted socially. Sophia's heart pounded painfully as she watched her son walk toward her. Guests stared in surprise. Daniel's hands trembled slightly. Then suddenly, one guest accidentally dropped a glass nearby. The loud crash echoed through the room. Sophia feared Daniel would panic and run away. But instead, something incredible happened. Daniel looked through the crowd until his eyes found Elias standing quietly near the kitchen entrance. The chef gave him the smallest nod. A reminder. You are safe. Daniel took a shaky breath and continued walking. Then he reached Sophia. The room became completely silent. And in a voice small, fragile, but heartbreakingly real, Daniel looked up at his mother and said, "I love you, Mom." The tray slipped from Sophia's hands and crashed onto the floor. She fell to her knees instantly, sobbing uncontrollably as years of pain, loneliness, guilt, and hopelessness shattered all at once. Guests watched in stunned silence while Sophia wrapped trembling arms around her son. For the first time, Daniel hugged her back. No business success. No amount of money. No award in the world could compare to that moment. Sophia cried against her son's shoulder like her heart had finally come home after years of wandering lost in darkness. And across the room, Elias quietly wiped tears from his own eyes. Because in that moment, a broken father who once failed to save his daughter helped another child find his voice. The story spread everywhere after that night. News outlets called it miraculous. People praised Sophia's devotion. But Sophia herself knew the truth. The real miracle was not wealth or therapy or status. It was patience, kindness, and a humble chef who chose compassion over judgment. A few months later, Sophia made a life-changing decision. Instead of returning Elias to an ordinary staff position, she partnered with him to create a special center for autistic children from struggling families. A place where parents could receive support without shame. A place built on patience instead of pressure. They named the center Lily's Kitchen, in honor of the little girl who changed lives even after she was gone. Parents from across the country began bringing their children there. Some came hopeless. Some came exhausted. Some arrived carrying the same silent heartbreak Sophia once carried. And slowly, through warmth, routine, food, music, and understanding, children began opening up in ways their families never thought possible. Elias finally found purpose again. Not by escaping his grief, but by transforming it into love for others. As for Daniel, his progress continued slowly but beautifully. He still had difficult days. Autism did not magically disappear. But now he laughed more often. He trusted more deeply. And every night before sleeping, he whispered the same words to his mother. "I love you, Mom." Words Sophia once believed she might never hear. Years later, Sophia would still remember the exact moment her knees hit the floor that winter evening. Not because it made headlines, but because it reminded her that healing often arrives quietly through ordinary people the world overlooks. A humble chef. A patient heart. A child searching for safety. And a mother who never stopped loving her son even when silence nearly destroyed her. If this story touched your heart even a little, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that remind us what truly matters in life. And before you go, leave a comment below telling us where you are watching from and which moment of this story touched your heart the most. We would truly love to know which countries our beautiful audience is watching from. Because sometimes, one small act of patience can save an entire family.